this happened when I was 16. That was the first time I saw Jeshua while I was meditating. I had this vision of Jeshua. I didn't know the name Jeshua at that point. He introduced himself. That's the name he gave me. So that's the name I use. He became my teacher. He wasn't, I didn't start channeling like this. He became my teacher. So he would tell me the things I needed to do, what I needed to read, where I needed to go. I started doing that, started doing retreats in the desert. I started reading Vedic. I started going to all sorts of different religions and trying to understand the places where he came from. And I wrote a few books on that. Yeah, so it was only last month, 25th of last month, that we did the first talk. I did a practice run on it at my Monday group, a short practice run. And I think one of the reasons for a long time I didn't want to do a group channeling, because Jeshua can be very harsh and direct in many questions, for those of you who have heard it already. And a lot of people don't like that. People like to have the flowery, happy, loving words and to be challenged. So it can be rather straightforward and harsh. So the best way to do it is actually just to start. I do break eye contact. I will look down most of the time, because when I look around, I sort of get fazed by the people and my own perceptions start coming in. I don't want my own thoughts coming in and disrupting what's being said. So I'm not being rude. That's just how I find it much easier to focus on what's coming through. So best way to start up, like I said, is actually just to start the questions. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes to really get into the flow of it. So I think we can just take it from there.
The results of those energies are different, and although we've all got ideas where things are coming through with each of us, what's your take on it?
Well, first of all, the only reason that you say that things are different, going in a different direction, is because you had some expectation that you're expecting to happen and it didn't turn out the way you wanted, and now you're blaming it on outer forces. You're always comparing it. We had this discussion last time, that we're always comparing things to how things should be and how things ought to be and how we want it to be. But things are always changing. You can't change the change. So if you have an expectation, you're either going to be highly disappointed or bored. Because when things happen exactly the way you wanted, it takes away the challenge of life, meaning it creates a boredom. And if things happen differently to the way you wanted, then you're very often disappointed.
Are we talking me in particular, or are we talking about people in general?
Well, people in general. This is a natural way that people live their lives, is they have an expectation. They want things to go a certain way. And when it doesn't, then they say, oh, it's the universe, there's changes in the field, there's changes in this, there's changes in that, and it's always the outer source, when it's actually simply their expectation didn't meet what they wanted.
Is it not true that there are changes?
There's always changes. Can you be more specific?
Feel free to jump in at any time, guys.
Well, with the planet alignments opening up now, it's creating new awareness on the planet. Do you see that?
To be honest, in my time, we didn't bother about planets. A lot of people, well, that was still the time the Earth was flat. So again, don't put your reasoning and your hopes, your expectations, and especially your blame on outer sources. It all starts within you.
We do like to understand, I think, what's going on around us. Perhaps in order to be better prepared, are you saying to ignore insights that we receive?
No, not ignore. I would rather say not to force. Because to not force means you are living in the present moment and you're allowing what is to happen to happen. But if you try and force things to happen, like I said before, that is when you have expectations, then things don't happen the way you want it. And when things don't happen the way you want it, you start blaming outer forces, and this causes an unrest.
I guess sometimes we might want to be prepared in a way that we go on holiday without any luggage, and we think, well, I could have done a lot better if I'd taken a few things with me.
Preparation is something that happens within you. It can't be an outer external source because the world is always changing. You can prepare for a sunny day and then the rain comes in, or vice versa. So to be prepared is to expect nothing but assume everything. In that way, you don't disappoint yourself and you also don't elevate yourself. This is living in the moment. And we had this conversation before, and I want to bring this up. I've been babbling about it for the last month. And I want to bring this up very importantly is we were talking about this. We actually ended with a conversation last time, is the perception of things. And where the problem lies is that people in general always want identification. They want to have a full identification for something, which in its sense is not wrong. And at the same time, it can also be very, very misleading, especially when it comes to spiritual terms. We were talking about that last time. In the words of energy, frequency, love, God, these are words that is used a lot, but the identification of it varies so much between people. And that is a problem. That is a massive problem. That is one of the underlying problems that religious groups as well as spiritual groups have. They use words and terminologies that they cannot define for themselves even. This is why you constantly have arguments among spiritual people, arguments among religious groups, because they each have a different identification of these words. And if you don't know the origin of the word, then you don't in fact know and fully understand what it is you are talking about. Does that make sense?
Are you saying that words we use, we must understand the true meaning of every word we use?
That's it. It's known as the origin of speech. Yeah. You have to know the origin of speech. And I'm not saying you have to go back in time and read ancient texts to find where the words come from, but you have to understand the nature of the word that you're using. If I were to ask everyone in this room who or what is God, I can promise you I'm probably going to get a different answer from each of you. Thus, when I am talking about God, how do I know that I'm giving you a clear message? It's going to be distorted. Each one is going to interpret my message in a different way because they have a different interpretation of the word. There's too many words like that. If you just take the Bible, the meaning of words, the problem with scripture is, especially the Bible, lacks so much information. It's not that it's wrong, it just lacks information, meaning the word, when I use the phrase, the kingdom of God, there are so many different ways people interpret that. And of course, when you have different ways of interpreting it, the message is lost because now people are arguing about what the word means. Even the way I use faith is very different to what most people believe it is. And that is a very big problem because when I am even sitting here, if I am talking to you about faith, everyone has a different opinion of what faith is. So how do I know I'm giving out a clear message?
Can you give us the meaning of faith? The meaning you believe is the true meaning.
Well, as I used it, faith is not to believe in something that you can't see. That is not faith. A lot of religious groups, let's take Christianity, they say they're religious, that's a faith that they have. That is not a faith because they have a scripture they very strongly believe in. That is their foundation. That is what they stand on. That is not faith. Faith is when you have nothing. Faith is when you have absolutely no belief, no expectation, and something happens to change you. That is what faith is. So when I talk about faith, I'm not talking about believing in something that you can't see or feel. I'm talking about having a sense of self in desolation. That is what faith is. So religious groups, if you take Christianity, it's not a faith at all because they have something very strong that they're standing on. They believe in their scripture. They believe in that so strongly that it's not faith anymore. There's a lot of reasons a lot of these words have changed. One is because, yes, the times change. As times change, meaning of words change. As language changes, language evolves as well. So language changes. Obviously, when you do translations, words change. And yes, you get the ones that like to change words simply to gain a better control or a better understanding over other people. So there's a lot of reasons words change. And this is called a very big downfall in spiritual and religious groups.
I think a lot of people are looking for the certainty behind the words. They're very searching for something that they can solidly land their feet on and their thinking on. But it can be limiting.
Well, the problem is, as long as you're doing that, you are creating your own assumptions. It can be very, very tricky. So there's a lot of words. I was very meticulous. That's one of the things that I was teaching very, very fervently, was the meaning of the words I was using. Because if you didn't understand the words I was using, you wouldn't understand the message.
Do you think we are a little careless these days?
Too careless. People tend to believe things very quickly. We discussed that actually. If you remember, people say, oh, if it resonates with you, it's correct. No. If it resonates with you, it means it fits your narrative and your belief. Doesn't mean it's correct.
May I ask a question?
Yes, please.
I'd like to change the topic a little bit. Yeshua, what does it feel like to you? Can you describe how it feels to be pure consciousness, to be God's source energy?
Well, we can come back to the previous topic, is what is defined as God energy? What is consciousness in itself?
And how does it feel?
It comes down very much to your, if I explain to you what it's like to be pure consciousness, the question is, how do you define consciousness? Because if you define consciousness in a certain way, I can describe it to you, but you won't be able to understand it because you have an interpretation of the word.
No, I'm not thinking about the word. I'm thinking about the experience of the energies and the vibrational frequencies of that.
I'll be happy to answer this if you can elaborate on what you mean by energies and frequencies.
Well, the energies and frequencies that we experience as a human, and even as an evolved human. I would like to know how it feels to be out of the human nature, out of the human consciousness, and transcend it to the more pure consciousness.
Be asking the meaning of the word frequency for you and the meaning of the word vibration for you. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, I would like to know, because people have different layouts of that, because everything is energy and frequency. The chair that is being leaned on right here is an energy and a frequency. So you talk about consciousness, energy, and frequency. Can you narrow that down?
I want to narrow it. I want to expand it.
Well, this is exactly actually what I mean. I understand your question, and I can honestly say that there aren't actually words to describe that, because even words are limited. Words are a perception of the brain. So to put words on that is close to impossible. But it's just the natural state of being. But here we come again to narrowing things down to understand their actual meaning. So energy and frequency is used a lot, and a lot of people can't define it, because high and low energies, high and low frequencies have nothing to do with something being good or bad. A lot of people like to say that high energies are good, low energies are bad. This is not the case. There's a lot of low energies that are considered very good: deep meditation, deep sleep. So energy and frequency is a very broad way of saying it. The example I used last time is that's very much if you go in a restaurant and you say to the waiter you want a bowl of energy. It's a very broad way, because that pretty much means the waiter can bring you anything and they will be correct. You have to be able to narrow that down and to be able to identify it. And this is not to demean you. This is not to try and break what it is you believe. This is for you to get a clearer and better understanding of what it is that exists. Or describe to me the color of a red. Describe the color of red. What is red? There you go.
You see the color, but you can feel the vibration. And you see, to me, I perceive the energy of God source as vibration, like a formula of so many vibrational frequencies. Just a formula, I think surely is a formula.
Well, that's how I make the point. So let me give you another example. Let's go into God force. because this is another one. A lot of people talk about God, whether religious or spiritual. Even the atheists talk about God not being. So let's go into the force of God. Well, broad question, who here works with some spiritual guide or source? Don't worry, I'm not going to demean you. I'm just asking if there's someone here.
Well, I have a question about that coming up. So,
Okay.
Yes, I think
So,
many of us would.
okay, so who can quickly volunteer just for a quick Q&A on that? Would you be all right with that?
You want to do?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. When this being first came to you, was it first as a feeling or was it first as an image? As a feeling. And how did you know what power this being possessed? Did they tell you, or was it a feeling, or was it something that you were busy with at the time?
A feeling.
No, but I mean the power of this being. What does this being help you with?
Oh, my evolution.
Okay, does this guardian or being have a form to you?
Mm-hmm.
Is it just a feeling in itself?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I
Oh, it's a her.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it does have some sort of image because it's a her.
I know who it's in. Well, I know one past life.
So she does have an image then. Okay, that's fantastic. So how that works is spiritual beings, spiritual powers, in whichever form it is, actually doesn't have form. It is just a power that exists. What the brain does is it gives form to the power. And it does this to better understand what that power is. And once you understand what the power is, you can better work with it. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm interested in the form of that.
So there, now because of these aspects, that there's a power, it has form, there is a spider on her jacket. There we go. I just blew it. Oh, let me get back into that. Hold on. Can you just say the last thing that you said?
Oh, yes, I'm not identifying with the form.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. That's what I was saying, is now you have all these attributes that you fully know what this power is. In a realistic form, that power has no form. It has no specific energy. It's a bit like a radio wave that is just a million things in the air and you're just tapping into one frequency. But this is how the brain works. The brain identifies it, picks it out, and uses that and gives it form in some form or another. He, she, your grandmother or what, is it the grandmother? It doesn't necessarily mean it is. It can also mean that it just gives off the same feeling that you had when you were with your grandmother. So there's a lot of aspects to that. But what these aspects do, and this is the beautiful thing, this is what is often called the grace of God, is that these things happen so that you can form a bond and a relationship with this power. And when you have a bond and relationship with this power, you can use it. You can because you fully understand it, meaning you can use it in your life. You can use it in the tasks that you're doing. And this is the big problem that people have with God. People can't define God. People don't have an image of God. They don't have any kind of relationship with God because they lack those aspects. When someone says God is everything, you can't have a relationship with everything on a physical level because you are physical. Do you understand what I mean? Mm-hmm. So when people give God an image, it's not to say that is what God looks like. It is to help with the mind to understand and identify what that power is in order to be able to work with it. And that is why I have become such a figure in the West, was because I have become the image of God to Abrahamic religion, which never had an image. And now suddenly they realize, oh, if we have an image of God, suddenly there's some sort of relationship going on. It's much stronger than if you have nothing. That's why I don't have a strong image influence in India, because they've got enough images of God. They don't need it. But in the West, I was the first one to create an image. And that image caused people to have a relationship with God again, because now they could identify it, they could see it, they could use their senses to identify the power that exists. Do you understand that?
I must admit that kind of makes me balk a bit when people they think they have a relationship with Jesus, God, that they call the same thing, but there's no depth to it, or there's no actual connection. They just say that.
Well, it's very similar to spiritual groups who say they have a connection with God, which is the universe and all things. There's no depth to it. It's an idea. It's a concept that they have.
Things like that.
You can do things like that. It's a good way to start. It's a good game to play, so to speak.
Yeah.
But the ultimate goal is to be able to have the pure identification of who and what is God, and whether or not you see God with an image. Because if you see God with an image and you understand the power and you can use that power, then you can absorb in that power, and then thus you become everything. You don't need to just focus on one chair or one table. That's going to take you forever if you want to go for one individual at a time. But that is why my ultimate goal and my ultimate teaching was always to know God and to attain God in every way possible.
So,
is it important that we use the power?
Well, you don't use the power, actually. You are the power. You just have to realize it. So if you can, and that's how you start. A lot of people, it's contradictive in the sense that in essence, you are God, but in another essence, you're definitely not. I never claimed to be God. I never claimed anyone around me to be God. I claimed that I'm the Son of God, and I claimed that you all carry the seed of God. You have the power to become that. You carry all the needed things within you to be God, to become that, to grow into that. But before that happens, you are still a child. It's like a child learning to walk. It needs the support. It needs something to stand on. That is why scriptures exist. That is why teachers exist. This is why images of God exists. You just have to find which one conforms to your nature. You see, you are given free will. You are given free will, which is also the grace of God, which means that when you come into the physical world, you can choose your own purpose. You can choose your own purpose. You can decide you want to help people. You can decide you want to do gardening. You want to help animals. All these things. This is the purpose you create. This purpose is limited. It's only for the lifetime. It disappears when you die. It's a beautiful thing. That's why enjoy the purpose that you're doing, because this is your moment to do that. However, you have something else. You have an eternal purpose. You have a soul purpose, something that is carried with you since the very, very beginning of all creation, that you're going to carry with you for eternity. And that purpose is to attain God. And every life, every purpose that you choose to do in life either helps you towards this goal or stagnates you for this goal.
Specifically for them, what advice would you give them related to what you just said?
So let's go into the nature of self. So you have different worlds around you. You have the physical world, which is very much the concept of material building, everything around you that is material. Now, then you have the nature of the physical world, which begins with you and you alone. You have 5 senses. We all know this. You can hear, you can see, you can smell, you can taste, and you can feel. These 5 senses that you have is the beginning and the end of the material world. The material world exists because you have these 5 senses. Whatever your senses pick up, you are identifying, meaning you are creating the physical world through the physical senses when they are activated. Everything you see, you identify. What you hear, you identify. What you smell, what you taste, what you touch, all these things you're identifying, meaning you are creating the physical world around you. You create some things to be bad, you create some things to be good. In a sense, it's just your senses sending you messages to the brain, which is identifying the world. Please stop me if I'm going too quick for you. So the physical world is only in existence because of your physical state. When your physical state ends, the physical world ends with it. That is the nature of man. That is the nature of the material world. And that's the nature of the material world. The nature of man is identifying whatever your senses are picking up. You're creating stories around it. You're creating likes and dislikes. You're creating your values, your moral system around all the things your physical senses are picking up. It's actually very simple when you think about it. Unfortunately, that is where most people stop. That is where most people live their lives. They believe that this is who they are, and how they create and how they identify things is their true self, and they live in this state. And it's a very despairing state, because in that state you always have duality. You always have things you love, you always have things you hate, you're always bitter about something or someone, you're always happy about this. Happiness ends, misery comes in, misery ends, happiness comes in. There's constantly the cycle, and this is the cycle of suffering, so to speak. And that's the nature of physical existence. Now we come down to the nature of the self. The nature of the self is the most beautiful thing that you can ever hope to experience. You are the most beautiful thing that has ever come into existence and will ever be in existence. The true self, the true nature of yourself, is always at peace, because the true nature of self doesn't have the physical senses to which to identify and divide the world around it. It is simply at peace. It understands things as they are. When there's a trickle of water running, your brain immediately starts working. Is that the toilet leaking? Is there a leak in my house? Did someone open a tap somewhere? Or is that the stream down at the bottom of the hill that I'm hearing? They always break it down, while your true self simply hears water trickling, experiences the water trickling. So if you want to understand the nature of the true self, you have to stop thinking. If you talk, you can't hear anything around you. If you think all the time, you can't experience what's around you, because you're always thinking. You always got things in your head. So this is why when we come down to meditation and attaining stillness, quieting your thoughts, whatever word you want to put on it, praying, is just to be quiet and to stop thinking. Does that make sense to you? So again, this is baby steps. It sounds very contradictory, because I just told you that you have to find an image of God, and now I tell you to not think of anything. So it's very contradictory, and this confuses people, rightfully so. But you have to remember, you are in beginning stages. You can't expect a small child, to suddenly get up and start running. They need the support of something to work on. And this is why I tell people, this is how you can build up to that. Gaining an image of God, being able to identify that power, whether, like I said, in India, there's millions to choose from. And each one is described what the nature of that deity is. If you go into Abrahamic religions, there's myself. If you want to use myself as that, I'm perfectly fine with that. And if you can have that image of what is the nature of God, that perfectly still, perfectly peaceful existence, that beautiful figure that is perfect in every way, and I'm talking on a physical figure, an actual person that has a perfect figure, that has a perfect understanding, that has the perfect voice, that you can put all the aspects that you conceive God to be into one figure. And if you can do that, you are about a third of the way there. Because if you can do that, when you sit down to be still and you just think of that figure, you become quiet. You become very quiet. And the more you practice this, the more you do this, you're going to find after a while that figure begins to disappear willingly. Because the more you feel that peace, the more you attain that peace, you will not need the figure anymore. But at first, I push it. You need a figure. Because you are physical, you're identifying with your senses all the time. Use that to your advantage. Don't think your senses are your enemy. Don't try and block, because that's what a lot of people try and do. They try and block the senses, sometimes forcefully. That doesn't help you. Just do it a little step at a time. Use your senses, but use it to what you want to use it for. And if you can use that to attain a figure of what you perceive to be divine, then you can find a peace. And then from there, it gets much easier. Well, every person has different stages and different ways of perceiving that. The problem that I see a lot with Nicole was like this for a long time, that God is just pure energy and everything. And not that it's wrong, but it's to better conform and understand to attain a peace. When this has happened, some Christians actually do this very beautifully. I'm going to use that as an example, actually. There are Christians that when they pray, when they go into deep prayer, it actually becomes a meditation because they stop thinking. And they have a little image of me, whether it's me on the cross or whether me lying down or whatever it might be. Maybe it's just an image in their head. And they focus on that. And they're filled with this sense of peace. And they're filled with a sense of love. And just because of that image they're looking at, they feel that sense of peace. And as they feel that, they become that. And when they become that, it becomes a real tangible power, and the image begins to fade. And that is why a lot of religious people who attain this, who experience this, actually leave the church because they realize it's not necessary for them anymore. And you see this in spiritual groups, people that don't mix well with spiritual groups anymore, that prefer to be on their own, have also come to a point where the figure begins to fade. And it's not to say it's wrong, but I really push to say it's very important to gain a figure. This has been very tainted in many religions because a lot of people feel, oh, if I give it an image, I'm, how can I say, limiting it. A lot of Abrahamic religions actually say you're not allowed to give God an image, and I believe this was purposefully done to refrain people from attaining a relationship with God. It's very important to have an image. I could describe God to the absolute perfection to my followers. That's why they thought I was so saintly, because that's why it was taken literally, that God was my father. God was my father because I had that image of someone who protected me, who was always my provider. God doesn't have to be a father. It was mine, because that's the way I identified it. That's the image I had, and I could describe it fully because I was absorbed in it.
So your image of your father was in a human form?
Very much so, especially when I was teaching. Because people need to understand that. If you are still the slave to the senses, you need a figure. It's very important to have a figure. And a lot of people don't want a figure simply for the reason because they say, oh no, I'm more advanced than that. And they cheat themselves of the experience. So having a figure is, I would say, a very big step. And this is, like I said, if you go to India, there's millions of figures to choose from. Understand the nature of the figures. Understand the power that exists there. If you want to see me as that figure, see me as that figure. The whole point of the figure is to feel all the things you feel is God, that energy that is everything, put into a single source, that you can actually have a relationship with it.
When you worked with your disciples, is this where you began?
This is where I always began.
And having read your book, I saw there was a lot of frustration on your behalf with your disciples, or with some of them. And one, could we be like the disciples and get that teaching? And do you believe we've got a better chance of moving forward?
The moving forward comes down to how badly you want to attain that peace, how badly you want to attain your true nature. If attaining your true nature is your ultimate goal, you're going to get there, because it's such a beautiful process. It's very difficult, but it's very beautiful. There's the quote in the Bhagavad Purana that actually says if it tastes like poison at first and becomes blissful nectar, then you know you're on the path of goodness.
As a child, you think,
I
yeah.
like the quote by Eckhart Tolle, who says the secret of life is to die before you die.
Yes.
And this is the transcendence of human nature.
Yes.
To embody these qualities.
Again, it helps to have that actual image, a physics, something that your physical self can see and hear and feel. In my younger years, I often used fire as the image of God because it gives off light, it gives off heat. It can burn you pretty badly if you don't treat it right. But that was my first concept of it. And the problem, coming back to Nancy, the problem with the disciples, you get two sides of the pendulum, especially with the disciples, because they were very indoctrinated in the scriptures of the time, which a lot of religious people are still indoctrinated with scripture, is that they take it physically. When I talked about my father, they think it's an actual father who gave the seed of life and is a physical flesh and blood being. It's not a flesh and blood being. It's just the image that is created from the power that exists.
A metaphor, perhaps?
A metaphor, you could say that. It's a very real metaphor because it's a real power. Yeah. And so when I spoke of my father, I spoke about it with full authority because it was a real thing. I didn't make it up. It is a real thing. And then you have the other side of the pendulum, because now my disciples took it to mean literally a physical flesh and blood. But now you get the other side of the pendulum that take it completely spiritual and just say it's an energy, which is so vast, there's no identity to it. So you get the two sides of the pendulum that swing back and forth between groups and societies. And then people are surprised that they don't see sages and great teachers rocking up in their societies anymore.
Working hard to keep his ego out and making a lot of changes in people's lives. Who hasn't done that? Why is that happening?
Well, let me put it like this. Does Rob think he's reached the ultimate goal of himself?
I don't think so. He's always humble in that respect.
Well, that's one of the things you can.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful what he's doing. This is the purpose you create for yourself. This is what I told you. You're born and you create your own purpose, what you want to do in the world. The ultimate purpose is to attain God fully and completely. So it's not to say that what he's doing is wrong. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not trying to degrade him in any way. No. But there's a far greater goal that is trying to be reached. And that's with
like that.
and that's with everyone. So you can do the work you feel you need to do on a physical level. That is the purpose you give yourself. But there is a far greater purpose that exists there. And like I said, that purpose either hinders or encourages your further growth. And what a lot of people do is when they find the physical purpose that they've created for themselves and they're happy doing it, they tend to think that's it.
Yeah.
They think that is the ultimate purpose, and they think that is all that is necessary. And when the end of life comes, and when you're on your deathbed, you realize that purpose is not following you anymore. You realize that purpose is dying out. And then that's why a lot of people at death are very frightened and disillusioned, because they don't understand why that's happening, that they feel that they have not attained anything in life. So if you are fully aware that your physical purpose is simply a contribution to the much greater goal that you're aiming for, you're going to find death is going to be a beautiful experience. Well, what happens at death is your five senses die, meaning you're only left with the non-duality part of yourself, which I say is the true nature of yourself. And the ultimate goal is actually to live a life and to experience the true nature of yourself while in the duality of the world. That is the goal, because that is what God is. God is this absolute peace that doesn't analyze, doesn't judge. I always said the Father does not judge. It's in fact, God cannot judge, because God doesn't have the material nature, doesn't have the senses to which to say what is rightfully, what is wrong, what is good, bad, hot, cold, light, dark. There is no such duality. Everything just is as they should be.
So you're saying that you wouldn't, so as Alan says, that you would be wanting to move away from duality completely? I mean, my thoughts would be that wouldn't be possible as a human.
No, technically it's not possible, because moving away from the duality is duality in itself. In my latest book, I write a lot about the nature of the self. That was my ultimate push in life, was to understand myself, my true self. And the true self is always at peace. And the thing is, if you're always fighting to understand the true self, you are creating a duality that itself is a duality. Because you are forcing, here we come to the thing again, you are trying to force something to happen that means not to force. So it's a very contradictive, and that's why most people struggle with it, because it's a very contradictive play that you're actually having, and you've got all your senses fighting against you, you've got your mind fighting against you. That is why last time we spoke very frequently of discipline, of having a specific discipline in your life.
It's been in my mind every single day. But I can get lost in the discipline of duality.
Yes, that's much easier because you have 5 senses supporting it and a mind supporting it.
We like evidence, don't we?
Well, what happens when you die? You lose your 5 senses, and then you become just a power that exists, that just is.
Would you call it the soul?
The soul, the spirit, there are so many ways of putting it. But yes.
Is that because it's being told to people, or is that because a new word has come up and everyone agrees with it?
Have you ever watched a flock of sandpipers on the beach?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever watched them?
One turns and they all turn?
They all turn,
Mm-hmm.
they all follow it. So yes, group analysis is very, very powerful. And especially that, well, human beings, we're very social creatures. We're not designed to be alone. So yes, we tend to go with the flow of the norm of society. That's probably why I stood out a lot, because I didn't go with that. And the people that don't go with that stand out quite blatantly. So yes, that plays a big role, that a lot of people believe in something that is being hammered into them or is the popular vote at the time. And you can see that throughout history, how many things have been said was good turned out to be bad, what was said to be bad turned out to be good. Everyone believes it on the moment because that is what society is teaching you to believe, whether it's other people or your media, whatever it might be.
We enjoy, well, I certainly enjoy, when something happens, like my phone says 111, or I see an eagle dive through my courtyard, and I'm just having a conversation with someone about something's really true, and there's this eagle, and it's like, wow, that must have a meaning. Now, what do you think about?
Well, again, I think that comes down very much to your perceptions of things, because if you have an incident like that and you say, oh, that must be a sign, and then someone else might be in the room that didn't have any conversations, just flipping on their phone, and they see the hawk come down, for them it means nothing. So
do they see the hawk that comes down? That's the question.
Well, then we can go into the conversation. If there's a tree that falls over in the forest and there's no one to hear it, does it actually fall down? So it comes down. It's not to say it's.
Because sometimes it's uplifting, and sometimes we need that.
There is something as signs. You do get that. There are sometimes, again, this is very considered the grace of God, where there are signs that come in to say that you should be doing something, you should not be doing something. The signs, the physical signs of what you see and hear wouldn't be necessary if you had the power of the self, of the true nature of self. You wouldn't need it. We always need outside confirmation of something. We always want the evidence. Someone just said that. We always want the evidence. And it's quite natural to do that. A lot of cultures and societies have certain signs of something being right, something being wrong. In my time too, there were a lot of signs. Well, in Nicole's book, the autobiography that she wrote, she actually wrote a whole chapter on this. Is signs, if you're going to see a sign, an ant crawling across the counter, you are going to have a very complicated life, because then everything's going to be a sign. When the wind comes up, it's a sign. A lot of children live like this when they play, when they out adventuring, but grow out of it. But imagine if everything was a sign. You'd get so exhausted. And not even that, but you would get so indoctrinated with your own narrative that you will find evidence of it everywhere. And this is the problem with religious and spiritual groups, is they tend to find proof of what they believe. And you can find proof of anything. You can even find proof that the earth is flat. So there's so many ways that you can confirm your own narrative. So we come back into the duality here. There are signs, as Nicole has learned it, signs are something usually that is very out of the ordinary. Like you said, a fantail coming into the house, I wouldn't say that's out of the ordinary. It can happen. A fantail landing on your finger and dancing about for a minute and then flying off. Now that you can argue is a bit odd. So I think signs should be made a bit more strict in your world. Otherwise, everything becomes a sign and your life just gets overwhelming. And then you keep looking on the outer scale for evidence of what you actually are, that you don't need the outside.
Can you please elaborate more on the discipline you're talking about for oneself to evolve?
The discipline is, we discussed it last time, when it comes to discipline, because like I said, it's the peace that you attain, the peace that is within, that is without duality, that is the true nature of yourself. It is beyond the nature of the physical world, which is attained by your senses. Your physical senses describe the physical world. When you discipline yourself, what you're doing is you're training your mind not to conform to the identification of the senses. Meaning that you get up in the morning and let's say you had a bad night and you're tired and you just want to get up, have a coffee, scroll on your phone a bit. And this is your senses saying, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I want this, I want that. But if you can have a discipline and say, I'm going to get up, maybe wash my face with some cold water, I'm going to make my bed, I'm going to fold my clothes, then I'll go to the kitchen and maybe I'll have a coffee, maybe I'll have a tea. If you discipline is just disciplining yourself not to allow the physical senses to tell you what you should do. If someone, this is what the Buddhists called mindfulness. If someone insults you, if you get angry, instead of getting angry, which is a sense response, you can pull away and analyze that with intellect. That is a discipline. So disciplining yourself allows you to train your mind to become your servant, not the other way around. Well, here,
how do we get back?
Well, first of all, stop being so hard on yourself. The material world is very dominating. And while you are in an embodied form, you are going to have hardships. Doesn't matter how. I threw quite a tantrum in the temple. It happens.
I'm always relieved about that. I think of that when I'm going hard.
These things happen. I had my little tantrums. The scriptures don't talk much about it, but I had my moments. And don't be so hard on yourself. These things happen. Again, if you're deliberately trying to avoid these feelings, like deliberately pushing them away and constantly fighting them, you are in duality. In fact, much more than just allowing it.
Who wants to waste their life watching TV? But yeah, the body craves it.
The body craves it. You always want a distraction because the mind and the body like to be in control. It's very scary out there because the reason they want to be in control is because it gives the individual the sense that they are immortal. Because when they are in control, death is a distant dream. They don't think about it. And if you don't think about death, if you don't think about your life, this life is coming to an end, then you have no desire for the ultimate purpose. So that is why...
You're not in a hurry because it's miles away, I'll get to it eventually.
That's right. So that is why the mind likes to play that. So the first thing I'll say is don't be so hard on yourself. I love pointing to children. Let the children come to me because the kingdom of God belongs to them. And that's exactly what it is. A child isn't not forcefully trying to attain anything. If you watch a kid playing, the child doesn't have a goal. What's the child's goal while it's playing? It's just enjoying the moment. It's not fighting it. It's not bitter about it. It's just completely absorbed. That child is just absorbed in that moment. So the first thing is stop being so hard on yourself. People say they feel guilty when they turn on the TV. Is stop being so hard on yourself. If you want to watch a bit of TV, it's fine, but you have to do it in a disciplined way. If you look at a kid, if the child wants to watch TV the whole day, there is a point where you have to say, no, that's enough. You have to go outside and play now. So it's like disciplining a child. You have to discipline yourself. So there's nothing wrong with putting on the TV, but you have to have a discipline. Nicole has the discipline to always write her dreams when she wakes up in the morning. And it's fine if she's just doesn't want to, if she's just not in the mood, she had a bad night, she doesn't want to write down her dreams. It's fine, but she knows she's going to have to write down those dreams sooner or later. And at this moment, she has 4 dreams she has to write down over the last week, which she hasn't done yet. And she knows it's accumulating. So that is the discipline. She knows she has to do it, and the longer you wait, the harder it gets.
I'm thinking to myself, do you community talk me?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah,
I mean, I can
there
answer
is
that.
no need to
What do you
be
think?
physically talking, just being in the presence of the being involved.
Well, that's what I said earlier. When you're talking all the time, you can't listen. And when you're thinking all the time, you can't experience the world, because then you're breaking it apart and analyzing it and putting words to it. So yes, you become much more quiet. As you become more disciplined, as you start having that identification or that relationship with a divine figure, when these things start to happen, you tend to become more quiet, because you're starting to attain the true nature of yourself, which is peace.
I mean, that makes sense to me.
Well, it's a good place to practice, to become silent in good company. Try and be silent in bad company. That gets tough. That gets tough.
Yeah, for sure.
You can ask for clarity. Like I said, if something is not perfectly clear, I hate misinterpretations. Yes.
It is clear, and see that.
But we will
Going
always
back to
be.
your, I wonder sometimes if we can cultivate faith, or whether it's something that comes on us.
Most people experience true faith when they have hit rock bottom in their life. It usually happens at a time of an accident, when they have a severe accident, when they lose someone they love, when they have hit complete poverty, that they just can't pay their bills anymore. The absolute breakdown is usually where true faith is experienced. Because, like I said before, if a religious person stands up with his scripture and says that he has faith in his religion, that's a very contradictory form of putting it, because that is not faith, that is a belief. Faith and belief are 2 very, very different things. Faith is when you have nothing, and you just say something has to work out because there's nothing left. So it's not faith in a scripture, it's not faith in a God, it's not faith in a power of anything, it's just something has to happen. That is ultimate faith. So if you look at, when I wouldn't even say I did it, but the people that I healed, it wasn't me that healed them, it was their faith that healed them, because they had nothing left. They had nothing left. So there was only one thing left, and that was either die or get out of the pit. Don't know how, but that is the belief. And you can see this in every culture around the world. When people hit the rock bottom, either they die, they take their own life, or something miraculous happens. It's one of the 2.
I've got 2 questions. One is there a reason you can so easily and frequently come to Nicole? What's the purpose? 2, in that realm where you exist, do you interact with other higher consciousness or spirits like Lord Krishna or Buddha or Mahavira?
Well, first of all, she's easy to work through, because she's trained for the last 25 years through discipline to shut out her own perception of ideas. So there are some things that she still struggles to say, and that's fine, but she can shut out her own perspective, so my message can be a bit clearer. When you talk about the aspects of Krsna or Buddha or all these deities, you have to understand those are figures of a power that exists. And they are, in fact, all the same power. The figure just defines the different nature of the power. So if you take the power of God to be peace or joy or protection, every single one of those words can have a different figure. So the power exists as one unit. The figure just helps you identify the power in itself, that you can attain a relationship.
So if you are interacting with Nicole as an individual, they must be interacting with others as well.
Well, it's the same power.
So you are the same power.
I am the same power as all of them. And they are the same power as me. This is the non-duality that I was speaking of.
But they are they're part of the one whole.
Yes. let me explain it. Let me explain it again. We talk about energy being everything. Everything is energy. But now you can break that energy down. You can this chair that is being leaned on. It's still the energy of everything, but now we're just talking about the chair. Are we talking about the pillow on the chair? Yeah, we can include the pillow on the chair. Can we include the wooden legs? Yes, let's include the wooden legs. It's all part of the same energy. If I have to put this into an image, let's take a puzzle. Puzzle is a good example. If I give you one piece of a 10,000 piece puzzle, just one piece, do you know what the picture is? Can you tell what the picture is? No, you cannot tell what the picture is. The picture is too big, too grand. You are one piece of a puzzle. That's what you are. But when you understand the true nature of the self, you become part of the big picture. Does that make sense?
My question would be, when you're out of the puzzle or when you're in the puzzle?
Well, technically, you're always in the puzzle.
Right.
But when you're in the physical world, you're only aware of the one piece.
Yeah.
Anything is possible. That's the joy of existence. But the puzzle, you cannot, if you look at a puzzle in its full entirety, you're not looking at the individual pieces. You're looking at the picture as a whole. So in that picture is all these great sages, all these great teachers, and you, including yourself. You're in that picture too. So it's one big picture. But what we do when we're in the material world, when we have our senses identifying and breaking things apart, we only see bits and pieces. We don't see them as one big picture. And again, this is where I said it's very contradictory, because now I'm saying, break God down into one figure. So it's contradictory, but this is the build-up. This is how you build yourself up to understand the true nature of yourself. And with that process, sooner or later down the line, you are going to see that image. And that image is the most beautiful thing you can experience in your existence. And the moment you catch a glimpse of that, even if you just catch the corner of that picture, you're going to be filled with such a desire to attain that goal that the rest of your life and following lives, you are just going to pursue that. And that is what makes great sages and great teachers, is when that becomes the ultimate goal and the ultimate obsession in your life.
What I have learned is, through the scriptures and what little understanding I have, is that there's different realms up above there, and we take birth in human form to evolve ourselves better through good karmas, and then we go to the next realm. Do you endorse this whole idea of this?
Well, very much so. Again, there's so many different concepts of that. As I said, the cause of existence is that your ultimate goal is to attain God or to experience God, to become part of the big picture, to not just see yourself as one piece, to experience it, to know that you are that picture, that you're not separated of the picture. If you take one piece out of a puzzle, the whole image is distorted. We all know that. So every life helps you evolve to that goal, or it takes you away from that goal. It hinders you or it encourages you. So that is the sense of karma that is being spoken about, that you are trying to attain that goal, whether you are consciously trying to reach for it or unconsciously trying to reach for it. Some people get so absorbed into the physical world and the identification of their physical senses that they lose sight of the ultimate goal. Some people get so absorbed in their own created purpose that they forget the ultimate goal. So in that sense, yes, I would endorse it. That's why you keep coming, because that is the ultimate goal. That is the evolution of your soul or spirit. That is what you're trying to attain. And that's why I say it is a small step at a time. Start with being able to give identity to the supreme power that you are trying to reach. That's why I said true faith is acknowledged usually in times of great disruption. When things are extremely harsh, when you have an extreme downfall, accident, something goes horribly wrong, you hit rock bottom, and that is where the ultimate faith comes in, where you say something has to happen. You don't know what it is, but something has to happen. That is usually where the great changes occur.
It cracks open and you...
It cracks open. That's right, because now you have nothing left to stand on. You have nothing left. And I say to people, instead of waiting for something horrible to happen to you, to wake you up, have a discipline where you can deliberately put challenges in front of yourself to attain that. That is why going out into the desert, 40 days in the desert that I did, that was exactly what it was. I wanted to hit rock bottom. Nicole has been out in the desert for 7 days. She can tell you how it feels to hit rock bottom. It's an absolute horrible feeling. But something happens after that, because something breaks open, like Nancy said. Something cracks, and you attain something that is more beautiful, more precious than anything that you can ever attain physically in the world. It's the most beautiful feeling.
Does that mean you can do it again and again?
Absolutely. I did it dozens of times. They only talk about the 40-day quest, but I've done it dozens of times, and Nicole's does it dozens of times. The reason being, it's just an amazing feeling.
Well, it's such a way of evolving, isn't it? And it's each time you go through that dark, we call it the dark night of the soul, you come up to a much higher plane of presence and understanding.
But it's not
our true self.
It's understanding that that's the case. For a long time, I was trying to get back, and I had no understanding that I could repeat. Well, not that I want to repeat that particular one, but that you can repeat it.
Yeah.
But it is about giving. It's surrendering, isn't it? It's complete surrender
at each stage.
If you're focusing on attaining that goal of becoming one with the power, to say that, and that is your main focus in life, is there an understanding that the power will supply and take care of a physicality, or on another level, creating a physicality to support me?
Well, the power that is God helps you attain your true nature, which is absolute peace. While you're in the physical world, you also have to remember that you have physical demands to you. You have to eat. You have to have a roof over your head. You have to have water, hydration. The 5 senses that defines the world around you, it has a very specific purpose, and its purpose is survival of the body. The body is a very, very important tool to have, and it's a wonderful tool to have if you know how to work with it. There are scriptures that actually relate to the body as a chariot being pulled by horses. If you don't have control of those horses, where are you going? What are the horses doing? So if you have control over that, you can create for yourself, you can make for yourself amazing experiences. So don't disregard the body, because once again, if you try and disregard the body, then you're also creating a form of duality. So this is the problem that I see in a lot of religious and spiritual people who claim to be very spiritual in so many forms, have health issues, have financial issues, and they're always in the state of duality and worry. And the reason being is because they have not attained a sense of peace. Because when you attain a sense of peace, you know how to look after yourself. It becomes a very natural thing to look after yourself. There was a question once asked in, I believe it's Taoism, where what does it mean to experience complete Zen? And the answer that was given was, when you're hungry, you eat. And when you're tired, you sleep. That's what perfect Zen is. But people don't understand that anymore. They don't, when they sleep, they're dreaming horrible things. They're worried about this. And when they eat, they don't even know what they're eating and they're indulging themselves. That's not Zen. That's not the understanding of the self. So it's the same with someone. If you are struggling physically with a disease, if you're living in poverty, or if you know someone living in poverty, if you know someone struggling with a disease, you cannot go to them and lecture them on spiritual things, because it starts with the physical body being able to survive to attain those things. That is why I helped people who were physically distressed. Does that answer it?
Rather than teach them, you help them. Is that what you're saying?
That's right, because if you're living in poverty and you're living in a box and you can't even get enough food, you're constantly on the verge of starving. If someone walks up to you and starts lecturing you on the power of attraction, you do not want to listen to it. So you are a physical body that needs certain things. And again, it's not to say it's a bad thing. You just have to know how to drive the chariot.
But it's a balance, isn't it, of mind, body, spirit, having that balance.
Yep, the three selves, absolutely. And like I said, that's a very beautiful piece of advice, is if you're hungry, eat. If you're tired, sleep. You don't have to analyze it. You don't have to break it down into some form of duality and some conflict. It's just being at peace and experiencing what you're experiencing and allowing that to happen, allowing, how do they say it, to go with the flow. That's a very common one that everyone knows, just to go with the flow. And going with the flow is a bit misinterpreted. It's not my favorite saying. I would rather say something like, don't force things.
Yeah.
Don't force
More
things.
like it is be natural rather than forcing. Because go with the flow means I'm useless, flat.
Exactly. Go with the flow sort of means don't do anything. Just sit around and think about things, which is not, that's not it. So I would say it's rather just don't force things.
Would you say our expectation of life has perhaps gone in the wrong direction?
I think it's what I said with the swing of the pendulum. Some people are just extreme on one way or the other. They're extreme on spiritual aspects, religious aspects, scriptures, or they're completely fanatic about their physical body and their wealth and their physical image and how they appear in the world. So there's two sides of the pendulum. And it's very sad that people tend to focus just on one side of the pendulum and people don't try and find that middle point. Follow what the population is doing. It's just the evolution of society, and that's going to happen forever. That's going to happen forever. That's why fashions come into existence and then disappear. It's just evolution.
This got implied that drinking too much water was damaging our bodies and not allowing something to happen. I'm never been good at the science. But yeah, flushes. Yeah.
We do need to hydrate, I think, more as we're evolving and there's more activity going on.
So there's a belief there. What I'm asking is, are these beliefs serving us, or surely you've got to believe something?
Well, if you're thirsty, drink.
Simple. It seems simple. I'm never thirsty, or very rarely.
Well, if you're never thirsty, that means you're getting enough water in.
Yeah, it would seem to be the way, and yet people in medical professions get very concerned about them.
Well, that's the evolution once again. It's that everything's become complicated. Mm-hmm. And it's very simple. If you're thirsty, you drink. If you start getting a headache and you think, oh, maybe I should drink more, then you drink a bit more. It's simple.
Well, I do wonder though, do we convince ourselves that this has to be done first? I'll have a drink, and then this has to be done, so I'll have a drink.
Here we come down to the discipline again.
Yeah.
If you say, oh, I should drink more, go have a drink. You should discipline yourself, not say, oh, I'll go do this later on. Let me first finish this. So here we come down to the discipline. So it all breaks down to the same thing.
And this is where I would say discipline can be confusing, because you can think, well, I started this job, I should finish it. And it's like, I guess it's a should be. So maybe shoulds and tries are warning signs for us.
Well, if you're busy with a task and suddenly it pops into your head that you should drink something, I would say go drink something and then go back to your task. Drinking takes...
I think we have a question.
Can we learn the art of channeling, or it happens when you're ready?
It's a bit like asking, do you learn to swallow, or does it happen naturally? It does happen naturally, but in order to learn to swallow, or in order to swallow, you need something to swallow. Does that actually make sense?
Yeah, but there's an urgent need to...
It comes down to how you perceive things. You see, channeling, there's a lot of people channeling today that can be very dangerous, because they're channeling, but they're filtering the channeling through their own ideas and perspectives. And that can be very, very dangerous. A lot of religious people or spiritual people do this. So if you want to attain, I wouldn't even say it's a gift. Everyone channels constantly, whether it's just when you're painting, when you're in any kind of form of activity that is in the moment, you are in fact channeling. But if you want to do this as Nicole is doing it now, you have to be able to break all the perceptions and ideas and interpretations you have of everything that's around you. Because if you have a certain way of thinking, saying that this is how everything functions, and then a channeling comes in, and the channeling goes against it, and your mind says, oh, no, I don't like that, I'm going to change that and change the wordings to mean something else, then you're doing very much what religion has done for centuries.
Can I ask about living outside of time?
Yeah, time's a good question.
How did you experience that as usual?
Time is a very broad word.
Okay. So stepping outside of what we would consider to be the clock rhythm of the day.
Well, first of all, you have to remember time is a concept. It's not something that actually exists. And you ask me how it feels to be outside of time. Everyone has experience being outside of time. When you're doing something crafty, when you're painting, when you're dancing, when you're playing an instrument, you're outside of time.
So outside of time is really being just present.
Completely present. Then there's past doesn't exist and the future doesn't exist. You're not regretting things that you didn't do, and you're not striving for a goal. You're just doing what you need to do in the moment. That is being outside of time. I would very much say it is a form of peace. If you're struggling and fighting against it, then you're causing a very dislikable situation. So it's to not force anything. But again, there's also a fine line to that you also, how was it said? You also don't want to make yourself a doormat. There's such a fine line to not forcing and being disciplined, because a lot of people misunderstand the not forcing. They think that means just lying around, putting on the TV, not forcing anything. The laundry will do itself somehow. That's not what it is either. There's a fine line between the two, and it comes down to the narrative that is being created. We talked about that also briefly in a different one, is when we were talking about when people say they are just going with the flow, they're just going with the force of the universe, and then there's suddenly no discipline. That's like telling a kid, oh no, you can do whatever you want. And you can imagine the chaos that kid is going to do if you tell them that. That's right. You can have whatever you want that's in the fridge. They are going to make such a mess of it. So there's a fine line between disciplining yourself and just allowing yourself to not force things. And if you're experiencing the peace, if you wake up at 2 a.m. and you're trying to force yourself to fall asleep and you're not falling asleep and you get more and more agitated, perhaps that is a thing to say, I'm not going to force this. I'm going to get up and do what you want to do. Sit silently, do a meditation, maybe clean the kitchen, what you wanted to do. That can very well be. So there's a very fine line between the two, which is something that it comes down to the individual's own experience. It's also sleep is just for the spiritual side of yourself to recharge. That's why babies sleep all the time, because coming into the world is a very big shock. So to sleep is just to recharge spiritually. And the 8-hour sleep is on average what doctors say you need. But if you look at people who are very highly spiritually charged, you can even take some Buddhists, they only sleep 2 hours in 24 hours. So it really comes down to the individual. Sleep is what you've attained spiritually. How well situated are you spiritually? The more you are at a sense of peace, because remember, what makes you tired? It's not so much the physical activities that make you tired, it's the mental activities. It's when you're constantly thinking, stressing, worrying, I have to do this, and you've got your schedule running, and those are the things that tire you. And that's why they say you need 8 hours, because society today has become such a rat race. But if you are at peace, if you have attained the true nature of yourself, sleep is not as important anymore, because you're in a state of peace. You're always calm.
Done many editions and even baked in the middle of the night.
It's a beautiful time because it's so quiet.
I enjoy that. I enjoy it. It's lovely.
Yeah, if people are so indoctrinated to a schedule that if you're out of the schedule, suddenly you think there's something wrong with you and your health is at stake. So
we listen to the world, we listen to the information, and we get concerned because we're not within
the norm, that's right.
And the thing that concerns me is that I go somewhere and they invite me to stay the night.
Bake them a cake. When they wake up, they got muffins.
Or take a good walk. That's always the answer for me.
As I said, if it's not affecting your health, if you don't feel it's really affecting your health, there's something wrong, that you are constantly waking up and your health is deteriorating, I don't see a reason why you should be concerned with it.
Is there a message that you, in summarising what you said, is there a message that you can share with us, perhaps us in particular, people have made a special pilgrimage today to come and listen, and into the wider society, if you were summarising?
Well, I say go out and have fun with the idea of challenging yourself. We don't like to be challenged. That's why a lot of people didn't like talking to me, because I always asked them questions about their questions, which was very off-putting for many people. So challenge yourself. When you're by yourself, you shouldn't feel insulted or defensive in any way, because if you're going to get angry and defensive with yourself, then you have some issues that you should really consider acknowledging. But next time you are thinking or talking about God or energy, break it down. You ask, what is God? And answer yourself. And if you say God is pure energy, you say, okay, what is the energy? And you say it's pure love or pure peace. Okay, identify what is love, identify what is peace. And you break this down and you really tear it apart to the smallest grain. And one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to realize you know nothing at all, or you're going to come to the acknowledgement of suddenly you can define what you're thinking about. I would say realizing you know nothing at all is the more powerful one. Because when you realize you know nothing at all, you become quiet and you start listening. And when you start listening, you start understanding what your nature is, because you're not identifying things anymore. So whenever you have a thought, break it down. Break it down as far as possible to the point that you can really realize that you don't know what you're talking about. And when you reach that point, you're going to realize, instead of getting angry or defensive, you're going to realize that there's a great peace in that. And then you're going to stop thinking, and you're finally going to have some rest. Who would you be without thought at all? Because you are a very, very peaceful being. It's only because of your senses identifying the world that you have conflicts and likes and dislikes. You go back to scripture and you can understand what I was talking about. When I was talking about the Son of Man, I was talking about the nature of the physical world, which is the senses and how we identify things. Son of God is the true self that exists within you. And the kingdom of God, which I said profusely exists within you, is the aspect of God, the seed of God that you have all possibility of growing into. That exists within you, that is your place of peace, that is the source of where you come from. Those are the three aspects. And if you can attain that, you're going to realize what the ultimate goal is, and there has been nothing more beautiful, more worth it to attain. It's the most beautiful thing. So go out, and I would say, yes, have an image of God. Doesn't matter what the image is. No one can tell you what the image of God is, because everyone's going to have a different relationship with God. Everyone's going to seek out a different source of the power of God. But if you have that one image that you can focus on, you're going to attain that peace. And over time, you're going to find that that image just fades away, and you are just left with a peace. So it's very difficult to do this because people are told exactly what God is like, and they're not allowed to think outside of that, meaning they are very limited. And spiritual people say God is everything, and let's not break it down into one thing, and then they sit with the same problem. So stop feeling guilty, stop feeling ashamed. You're not forcing anything on anyone else. This is your thing. This is why having a little private corner in the house or a private room that you can just have your items, your little figurine or your picture or whatever it is that gives you a sense of peace, it gives you that image that makes you understand your true nature, that you are a child of God. And you can reach in and you can become that which is the kingdom. You can reach into that space that is just pure and peaceful. And it all starts with baby steps. Everyone wants enlightenment with a bang. It doesn't happen like that. It's one step at a time. And it's difficult at first. It's like trying to get that rock up the hill. Once you get it up the hill, it's much easier. So that was just the message that I can give out today is, don't be ashamed if you want to give God an image. Again, if it's me, go ahead. Carl used me for many years. It's just something to be able to identify. When you look upon an actual image of God and you can attain a peace from that, that can become your focus point. And then as the picture fades, you understand who and what you actually are, and then you start seeing the full puzzle. The point is to be able to define God. You can't define God. You cannot define the power that is God. If you cannot define the power that is God, you cannot define yourself.
We could start all over again. We're taking that apart.
We start all over again. And this has been the process since the beginning of time, since man first created a religion. This is why religion was created to begin with, was to try and understand what is God.
Maybe what we are. Thank you very, very much. We've just hit 12 o'clock, so I'm going to stop you here. We're very grateful for your time and very grateful for your Nicole. Hopefully you're feeling comfortable. Please help yourselves with something to eat or something to drink before you go. And if you want to have a chat with Nicole, feel free to do that if you'd like to.